What if the dream life was actually a nightmare in disguise for one woman married to a New York City billionaire? Her fairy tale pregnancy was about to become a public humiliation, in the middle of a luxury baby boutique surrounded by everything a new mother could want. Her husband leaned over to the store clerk and uttered 7 words that would shatter her world and ignite a war for her own child. Don't worry about her opinion, she's just a surrogate. But he made one fatal mistake. She wasn't a surrogate. She was his wife, and he had just handed her the weapon she needed to burn his empire to the ground. The air in the Upper East Side penthouse was always the same cold still, and smelling faintly of white lilies and lemon-scented cleaning products. It was the smell of wealth Isabella Rossi had decided the scent of a life so curated that even the oxygen felt filtered and artificial. From their 68th floor living room, Central Park, was a perfect manicured rectangle of green, a world away from the chaotic, vibrant streets she used to walk. Now her world was this glass box in the sky, and its king was Carter Sterling. At 8 months pregnant, Isabella felt less like a blooming mother-to-be and more like a precious vessel, a human incubator for the Sterling dynasty's next great hope. Every morning, a nutritionist-prepared meal appeared. Every afternoon, a prenatal yoga instructor guided her through poses that felt more performative than relaxing. Every evening, she would dress for dinner with her husband, a man who looked at her stomach with the same proprietary gleam he reserved for a newly acquired subsidiary of Sterling Industries. Carter Sterling was a man forged in the crucible of old money and new ambition. He moved with an unnerving stillness, his dark hair perfectly coiffed, his bespoke suits never showing a single crease. He didn't speak. He issued statements. He didn't ask. He directed. Their marriage, a whirlwind affair that had stunned New York society, had felt like a fairy tale for the first few weeks. The handsome billionaire sweeping the quiet, doe-eyed art gallery assistant off her feet. But the fairy tale had quickly revealed its ironclad terms and conditions. Today was supposed to be different. Today was supposed to be real. They were going shopping for the baby, not online, not through a personal shopper, but together at Bon Point, the chic French children's boutique on Madison Avenue. It was Isabella's one request, a desperate grasp for a moment of genuine shared anticipation, after some initial resistance about the inefficiency of it all. Carter had to. Her surprise agreed. "Is this really necessary, Isabella?" he asked, his eyes fixed on the stock market ticker, scrolling across the television screen as she stood by the door. She was wearing a simple but elegant cream-colored cashmere dress, one he'd bought for her. It clung to her swollen belly, a constant, unignorable reminder of the precious cargo she carried. "I think it is," she said softly, her hand resting protectively on the curve of her stomach. "I want to pick things out, to feel them." He sighed a sound of profound executive impatience and clicked the TV off with a remote. $500 onesies feel the same as $50 onesies, I assure you. But fine, let's get this over with. The ride down Madison Avenue in the back of the silent, imposing Bentley was suffocating. Carter was on his phone, his thumb flicking dismissively through emails. Isabella watched the city flash by a blur of people living loud, messy, authentic lives. She felt a pang of longing so sharp it was a physical pain. She was lonelier now, surrounded by unimaginable luxury, than she had ever been in her tiny, drafty walk-up in Brooklyn. Bon Point was an oasis of quiet tastefulness. Tiny, exquisitely crafted clothes hung on miniature racks. The air smelled of clean linen and a hint of baby powder. For a moment, Isabella felt a wave of pure, unadulterated joy. This was for her baby, her son. A young, bright-eyed clerk named Chloe approached them. "Good afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. It's an honor to have you. Can I help you find anything in particular?" Carter gave a curt nod, already looking bored. "My wife needs to select some essentials." The way he said "wife" sounded like a job title. Isabella's smile was genuine as she turned to Chloe. "Hello. I was hoping to look at some coming-home outfits, and maybe some soft blankets." Her hands drifted over a row of impossibly soft sleepers, her fingers tracing the delicate embroidery. She picked up a tiny, pale blue cashmere jumpsuit. It was perfect. She could picture her son's tiny limbs in it, could almost feel his warmth. "Oh, this one is beautiful," she murmured, holding it up. Carter, who had been impatiently tapping his foot by the entrance, strode over. He glanced at the garment in her hand, with a look of utter indifference. "It's fine," he said. "Get 5 of them. And the matching hats." "But I want to look," Isabella insisted, a note of pleading in her voice. "This is supposed to be a special moment." She turned to Chloe, a fellow woman hoping for an ally. "Don't you think this one is just perfect?" Chloe, sensing the tension, offered a professional, placating smile. "It's one of our most popular pieces, ma'am. The quality is exceptional. A wonderful choice for bringing your little one home." Carter let out another one of his long-suffering sighs. He took a step closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial tone, yet loud enough for both women to hear clearly. He gestured towards Isabella, with a dismissive flick of his hand, a smirk playing on his lips as he addressed the clerk. "Look," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Let's speed this up. Just give me one of everything you recommend for a newborn boy. The best of everything. Don't worry about her opinion." He paused, leaning in, as if sharing a dirty little secret. "She's just the surrogate." The words hit Isabella with the force of a physical blow. The air rushed from her lungs. The charming little store suddenly felt like a shrinking, airless box. Chloe's professional smile froze her eyes, widening in shock and embarrassment. She looked from Carter's smug face to Isabella's, which had gone ashen. Just the surrogate. The phrase echoed in the pristine, silent boutique. It was a brand, a label, a dismissal of everything she was, everything she felt. It erased her identity as a wife, as a woman, and most cruelly, as a mother. In that one sentence, he had reduced her to a rented womb, a biological vessel hired to perform a service. All the love, the fear, the hope, the kicks and flutters she felt from the life growing inside her, it was all delegitimized in a single callous pronouncement. Her hand, still holding the tiny blue jumpsuit, began to tremble. Her vision swam. She could feel Chloe's pity like a hot spotlight. Carter, oblivious or perhaps simply indifferent to the devastation he had wrought, pulled out a black Amex card. "Bill it to the corporate account, Sterling Industries. Have it all delivered this afternoon." He turned to go, then glanced back at Isabella, who stood frozen in place. "Are you coming?" he asked, his tone laced with annoyance, as if she were the one creating a scene. She couldn't speak. She could only stare at him, her mind a maelstrom of shock and a new, terrifying clarity. This wasn't just arrogance. This wasn't just a slip of the tongue. This was what he truly believed. In his world of transactions and assets, she and the baby were his ultimate acquisition, and he had just clarified her role in the deal for all to hear. The fairy tale wasn't just over. She now realized it had never even begun. It was a contract, and he had just publicly stated her line item. As she numbly followed him out of the store, leaving the perfect blue jumpsuit behind, a cold, hard resolve began to crystallize in her heart, replacing the shock. He had made a mistake, a catastrophic one. He thought he was defining her, but in reality, he had just set her free. The ride back to the penthouse was a study in Arctic silence. The plush leather seats of the Bentley felt like a coffin. Isabella stared out the window, her reflection a ghostly pale mask. She didn't look at Carter. She couldn't. If she did, the fragile dam holding back a tsunami of rage and grief would shatter. Carter, for his part, seemed entirely unconcerned. He had resumed his perusal of his phone as if the last 10 minutes hadn't happened. To him, the incident was closed, a minor inconvenience efficiently handled. When the elevator doors opened directly into their apartment, Isabella walked straight towards their bedroom. Sweet, her movements stiff and robotic. "I'm having dinner with the board tonight," Carter called after her. "Don't wait up." She stopped in the doorway, her back still to him. Her voice, when it came, was dangerously quiet. "What you did back there, Carter. What you said." He finally looked up from his phone, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "Oh, for God's sake, Isabella. Are we really going to do this?" It was a figure of speech, a way to expedite the process. The girl was fawning all over you. It was nauseating. A figure of speech. She turned to face him, and he might have been taken aback by the fire in her eyes if he'd been paying attention. "You humiliated me. You erased me. You told a complete stranger that I am not the mother of my own child." He scoffed, setting his phone down with an air of finality. "Don't be so dramatic. You're being overly emotional. It's the hormones." He walked towards the bar and poured himself a whiskey. "You are carrying the next sterling. That is your purpose. That is the arrangement we agreed to. Whether the clerk at a baby store understands the nuances of our situation is irrelevant." The word arrangement hung in the air between them, heavy and cold. It was the word that defined their entire relationship. She remembered the day his lawyers had presented her with the marital and progeny agreement. At the time, she'd been so blinded by his charm, so overwhelmed by the sheer force of his wealth and attention, that she had barely registered the chillingly transactional language. It had started 2 years ago. Isabella was working at a small, struggling art gallery in Chelsea. Carter had walked in to acquire a painting, and his focus had immediately shifted to her. He was dazzling intelligent, and pursued her with a singular, relentless focus that left her breathless. He took her to restaurants where the chefs came out to greet them, personally flew her to Paris for a weekend, and showered her with gifts that cost more than her yearly salary. She, a quiet girl who had grown up in a loving but modest family in Queens, was utterly captivated. When he proposed after only 6 weeks, she thought it was the most romantic thing that had ever happened. The ring alone, a flawless 8-carat diamond, was a headline in the society pages. It was only after she said yes that the arrangement was presented. His lawyer, a severe man named Mr. Abernathy, had sat her down in a sterile boardroom. "Carter is very fond of you, Isabella," he'd said, pushing a thick leather-bound document across the table. "But you must understand, a man in his position requires certain assurances. The continuation of his family line is of paramount importance. This agreement simply formalizes the terms of your union and your role in securing the sterling legacy." She had naively thought it was a prenuptial agreement. It was so much more. It detailed her duties as a wife to present a serene and supportive public image, to host functions, and to refrain from any professional pursuits that might distract from her primary obligations. But the most chilling sections were under the heading progeny. The contract stipulated that she would endeavor to produce a male heir within the first 3 years of marriage. Upon the birth of said heir, a trust of $10 million would be established in her name. If she failed, or if the child was female, the terms were subject to renegotiation. The document was filled with clauses about genetics, prenatal care, and postnatal obligations, all framed in the cold, hard language of a corporate merger. Crucially, it gave Carter sole legal and physical custody of any and all issue from the marriage in the event of a dissolution. She had felt a knot of ice in her stomach, but she had signed it. She was in love, she told herself. This was just how people like Carter operated. It was about protecting his Emma. It wasn't personal. She had convinced herself that his love would melt away the cold ink of the contract. Now, standing in their silent penthouse, she saw the truth. The contract wasn't just a document. It was his Bible. He didn't see her as a wife. He saw her as a beautiful high-risk investment that was about to pay out. The arrangement, she repeated, her voice laced with a bitterness that surprised even her. I see. So in our arrangement, what am I, Carter? Am I your wife, or am I a service provider who's about to deliver a product? He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, his expression unreadable. You're Mrs. Carter Sterling, a title many women would kill for. You have a life of unimaginable privilege. All I ask in return is your discretion and your cooperation. Today you were being uncooperative. I rectified the situation. End of story. The finality in his voice was like a door slamming shut in her face. There was no remorse, no understanding. This was her life, a gilded key where her only value was in her womb. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay in their vast, empty bed, listening to the hum of the city far below. The baby kicked a strong, reassuring thump against her ribs. It was a secret conversation between the two of them. I'm here, Mom. I'm real. She placed a hand on her belly. I know, she thought, and I will not let him do this to you. I will not let you be raised to be an asset. You are a person, my son. A decision, cold and clear, settled over her. The shock had passed. The grief was hardening into anger. The anger was forging itself into a plan. He had called her a surrogate. He believed she had no power, no rights. He believed his contract was ironclad. But contracts could be broken. Slipping out of bed, Isabella went into her small, private study, the one concession to her old life he had allowed her. She powered on her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys, her search terms specific and urgent. Top divorce attorneys NYC. Maternal rights. Challenging coercive marital agreements. Page after page of slick corporate law firms appeared. She dismissed them. Carter could buy and sell those lawyers before breakfast. She needed someone different, someone who fought for the underdog, someone who understood the unique viciousness of men like her husband. And then she found it. A feature in New York Magazine titled The Lioness of the Family Court. The article was about a lawyer named Alexandra Vance. She was known for her take-no-prisoners approach and for representing women against some of the city's most powerful and vindictive men. The article quoted a vanquished opponent. Going against Alexandra Vance is like wrestling with a honey badger. You don't win. You just hope to survive. The article included a picture. Alexandra Vance was sharp with intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through the camera. She wasn't smiling. Isabella looked at the photo for a long time. This was a woman who didn't deal in figures of speech. She dealt in facts. And Isabella had a very powerful fact on her side, a fact Carter had so carelessly handed her in a baby store on Madison Avenue. With a trembling hand, she picked up her cell phone. She found the number for Vance Law Group and dialed, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. It was well after 10 p.m., but she left a message on the after-hours line, her voice low and steady. "My name is Isabella Sterling," she said. "My husband is Carter Sterling. He just told a stranger that I'm the surrogate for my own baby. I need your help. I believe my life and my child's life may be in danger." Hanging up, she felt a terrifying, exhilarating surge of adrenaline. The war had begun. Carter Sterling had wealth, power, and a team of ruthless lawyers. But Isabella Rossi Sterling had the truth, and soon she hoped she would have a lioness on her side. The office of Alexandra Vance was nothing like the sleek, impersonal boardrooms of Sterling Industries. Located in a historic building in the Flatiron district, it was filled with books, case files, and modern art that was vibrant and slightly aggressive. It felt like the command center of a brilliant, restless mind. Isabella sat on a worn leather couch, a cup of tea untouched on the table before her. 2 days had passed since the incident at Bond Point. 2 days of playing the part of the dutiful hormonal wife, while inside she was a bundle of nerves and steely resolve. Alexandra Vance entered the room, and she was even more formidable in person. She was a woman in her late 40s, with salt and pepper hair cut in a severe, stylish bob, and eyes so piercing they seemed to assess every truth and every lie in an instant. She didn't offer platitudes or comforting smiles. She offered a firm handshake and got straight to the point. "Mrs. Sterling, Alexandra Vance," she said, her voice crisp. "My assistant gave me the broad strokes. Your message was compelling. Tell me everything. Start with the contract." For the next hour, Isabella talked. She recounted the whirlwind romance, the shock of the marital and progeny agreement, the years of feeling like a decorative object, and the soul-crushing incident at the baby store. She left nothing out, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. Finally, she slid a copy of the agreement across the table. Alexandra had requested she bring it. Alexandra put on a pair of reading glasses and began to read. She was silent for a full 10 minutes, her only movement the occasional turn of a page. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant wail of a siren. Isabella held her breath. Finally, Alexandra took off her glasses and looked at Isabella. Her expression was grim. "This is the most creatively barbaric marital contract I have ever seen," she said, her tone devoid of emotion. "It is a masterpiece of coercive control dressed up in legalese. He essentially bought you and the rights to your genetic material. Abernathy's work, I presume. He has a reputation for this kind of patriarchal filth." Isabella nodded, a strange sense of validation washing over her. "Yes, that was his name." "Carter thinks this document makes him untouchable." Alexandra continued, tapping a finger on the custody clause. "He believes this gives him the right to take your son and discard you with a severance package. In a normal situation, it would be a formidable obstacle. But Carter has grown arrogant, and arrogance creates blind spots." She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto Isabella's. "The incident at Bond Point. It's not just a humiliation, Mrs. Sterling. It's a gift. It's a public declaration of his state of mind. He doesn't see you as a mother. He sees you as a vessel. We can argue that this state of mind proves the coercive nature of this entire agreement. We can argue that it makes him an unfit parent, a man who would deny his child its own mother for the sake of his ego is not a man who has that child's best interests at heart. Hope, fragile but fierce, bloomed in Isabella's chest. "So you think we have a case?" "I think you have a war," Alexandra corrected her. "And you have to be prepared to fight. Carter Sterling will not go quietly. He will try to bury us in motions. He will try to paint you as an unstable gold-digging hysteric. He will use every dollar of his fortune to crush you. Are you ready for that?" Isabella placed a hand on her belly. The baby was quiet, as if listening. "He called me a surrogate. He thinks I'm an employee he can fire. What choice do I have? For my son, I'm ready for anything." A ghost of a smile touched Alexandra's lips. "Good. Because anything is exactly what it will take. From this moment on, you are a soldier in a covert operation. Your home is enemy territory. You need to become the perfect spy." The strategy session that followed was intense. Alexandra's plan was meticulous. "First evidence," she instructed. "You need to document everything. Keep a secret journal. Every dismissive comment, every act of control, every time he refers to the baby as his heir or his legacy instead of as your son. Note the dates, the times, the context." Second communication. He will become suspicious if you are suddenly silent. You must continue to play your part. Be the wife he expects you to be. But when you speak with him, use a recording app on your phone. Keep it in your pocket. We need his voice, his own words to hang him with. Third, assets. He will try to hide money. My forensic accounting team will start digging into Sterling Industries. But anything you can find, credit card statements left out, private banking documents, anything. Photograph it and send it to me through a secure messaging app I will set up for you. And finally, and this is the most important part, Alexandra said, her voice dropping, do not under any circumstances let him know that you have seen a lawyer. Your greatest weapon right now is his arrogance. He doesn't believe you are capable of fighting back. We will use that belief against him. We will build our case in the shadows until we are ready to strike. Isabella left the office feeling like a different person. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was now overlaid with purpose. She was no longer just a victim. She was an agent in her own liberation. The following weeks were the most harrowing of her life. She was an actress giving the performance of a lifetime. She smiled at Carter's cold jokes. She complimented his business acumen. She discussed the nursery decorations with a placid sweetness that made her sick to her stomach, and all the while she was gathering her arsenal. Her phone became her sword. She recorded a conversation where Carter casually discussed the terms of her bonus once the baby was delivered successfully, as if he were closing a deal. She recorded him telling his mother, Genevieve, over speakerphone, "Don't worry, Mother. The girl knows her place. She won't be a problem." Genevieve Sterling was an even colder, more terrifying version of her son. A razor-thin woman draped in Chanel and diamonds, she treated Isabella with a barely veiled contempt. She visited often, ostensibly to check on Isabella's health, but really to inspect the investment. During one such visit, Isabella left her phone recording on the kitchen counter while she feigned a dizzy spell and went to get some water. Genevieve, thinking she was alone, made a call. "He's an absolute fool, of course," Genevieve's sharp voice said into her own phone. "Telling a shop girl he sees the girl as a surrogate. So uncouth, but the principle is sound. She serves her purpose, she gets her payout, and the child is raised a Sterling, free of any sentimental maternal influence. The contract Abernathy drew up is a work of art." Isabella stood in the pantry, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. But she didn't make a sound. She saved the recording. It was gold. It was proof of a conspiracy. She photographed statements for a Cayman Islands account she found in his desk drawer. She journaled every night, her hand cramping, as she detailed the daily emotional cruelties, the chilling indifference, the profound loneliness of her gilded cage. Her belly grew larger, and the baby's movements became stronger, more insistent. They were her constant reminder of what she was fighting for. This wasn't about money or revenge. It was about freedom. It was about saving her son from a life as a possession, a pawn in a billionaire's dynastic games. One evening, as she was preparing for a charity gala, Carter came into her dressing room. He was fastening the cufflinks on his shirt, a pair of diamond-encrusted panthers. "The board is exceptionally pleased with the third-quarter projections," he said, looking at her in the mirror. "And the news of the heir has certainly stabilized my position. You've been a valuable asset, Isabella. I'll be sure to remember that when it's time to settle your account." The old Isabella would have flinched. The new Isabella, the soldier, simply smiled back at his reflection. "I'm so glad I could be of service, darling," she said, her voice as smooth as silk. In the pocket of her gown, her phone was recording every single damning word. The sword was being sharpened. The time to strike was drawing near. The baby shower was Genevieve Sterling's masterpiece of passive aggression. Held in the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel, it was less a celebration of new life and more a corporate branding event for the Sterling dynasty. The color scheme was a sterile sterling blue and silver. The cake was a multi-tiered monstrosity adorned with a sugar-sculpted lion, the Sterling family crest. The guest list was a who's who of New York's financial elite. There was not a single person from Isabella's own family or her old life present. Genevieve had misplaced the address list she'd provided. Isabella sat on a large throne-like chair at the front of the room, a fixed smile plastered on her face. She felt like an exhibit at a zoo. Women she'd never met would approach, touch her belly, without asking, and offer clipped impersonal congratulations before moving on to network with someone more important. "You must be simply exhausted," cooed a woman whose face was pulled so tight she looked permanently surprised. "But it will all be worth it for Carter." "A boy we hear Genevieve must be over the moon. She's been waiting for this," said another, clutching a glass of champagne. Every comment was a tiny paper cut. They didn't see her. They saw a function, a means to an end. Carter was in his element, gliding through the room, accepting congratulations like a conquering hero. He never once came to her side. He never once looked her in the eye. He was celebrating his victory, and she was merely part of the stage dressing. Then came the speeches. Genevieve took the microphone first. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this momentous occasion," she began, her voice echoing slightly in the vast room. "My son Carter has achieved so much in his life. He has built an empire. But a legacy is not built of steel and glass alone. It is built of blood. Today we celebrate the continuation of that bloodline. We celebrate the future of the Sterling name." She raised her glass. "To the Sterling heir!" "To the Sterling heir!" the room chorused back. Genevieve spoke for 10 minutes about the Sterling family history, about Carter's grandfather, about the importance of legacy. She did not mention Isabella's name a single time. It was a deliberate surgical erasure. Isabella felt a familiar cold dread creep over her, but she forced herself to keep smiling, to clap at the appropriate times. In the tiny jeweled clutch in her lap, her phone was recording. Then Carter took the stage. He looked impossibly handsome, a king surveying his court. "Thank you, Mother," he said. "And thank you all. This is, as my mother said, a great day. A man builds a company, not for himself, but for those who come after. For years I have focused on building Sterling Industries. Now it is time to secure its future." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I have always believed in making the best possible investments, in finding the best assets and acquiring them. This next phase of my life is no different. I have taken steps to ensure that the next generation of Sterling leadership will be strong, healthy, and unimpeded by unnecessary complications. The arrangements have been made, and everything is proceeding perfectly according to plan." The crowd applauded politely, understanding the coded language of their world. Arrangements, assets, unimpeded. He was talking about her. He was talking about their contract, their sham of a marriage in front of 200 people. He was boasting about it. It was more brazen than the comment in the baby store. This was a public declaration to his entire world. He was telling them all that she was a hired vessel, and that he had arranged for a clean, uncomplicated delivery of his heir. Isabella's blood ran cold. She looked over at Alexandra Vance, who was standing discreetly at the back of the room, posing as a family friend. Alexandra met her gaze and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. "This is it," the nod said. "This is the kill shot." The rest of the shower passed in a blur. Isabella opened extravagant gifts with feigned delight: a Tiffany silver rattle, a Hermes baby blanket, a miniature drivable Bentley. Each gift felt like another bar on her son's cage. These weren't gifts for a baby. They were accessories for a princeling, tools to shape him into another Carter, another Sterling. As the party wound down, Genevieve glided over to Isabella's throne. "You look a little pale, dear," she said, her eyes like chips of ice. "Do try to keep your strength up. The final weeks are the most crucial phase of the project." The project. Isabella looked up at her mother-in-law, the architect of her misery. The actress in her finally faltered. She let the mask of placid compliance drop just for a second. "He's not a project, Genevieve," she said, her voice low and steady. "He is my son." Genevieve's thin lips tightened. "Don't be sentimental. It's unbecoming. You have a role to play. I suggest you remember that." Later that evening, back in the silent penthouse, Carter was jubilant. "Abernathy said the board is ecstatic," he said, loosening his tie. "The heir speech was a masterstroke, solidified the family man image. Our stock will probably tick up a point on Monday." Isabella just stared at him. "You know I was there, right? The mother of the child you were talking about." He waved a dismissive hand. "Don't start, Isabella. It was a business speech for a business audience. You wouldn't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," she said, and the cold fury in her voice finally made him pause and look at her. "You stood on a stage and called your wife and child an investment and an arrangement. It's what they are," he shot back, his patience finally snapping. "It's the truth. This is what you signed up for. Did you think I married you for your scintillating conversation? I married you for your hips and your clean genetic history. You are carrying my son, and for that you will be made a very wealthy woman. That is the deal. So stop this pathetic sentimental act. It's starting to bore me." It was all out in the open now. The last veil of their charade had been ripped away. He had said it all. The cruelty, the coldness, the unvarnished, monstrous truth of their marriage. And her phone, resting on the nightstand just a few feet away, was recording everything. She didn't say another word. She simply turned and walked into the bathroom, locking the door behind her. She leaned against the cool marble, her body trembling, but her mind was a block of ice. She sent a single secure text to Alexandra Vance. He just confessed to everything. The whole philosophy. It's all on tape. Is it time? The reply came back almost instantly. It's time. I'll have the papers drawn up by morning. We file an emergency sit ex parte petition at 9 a.m. Be ready. The war goes loud tomorrow. Isabella looked at her reflection in the mirror. She looked pale and exhausted, but her eyes were blazing. The surrogate was done playing her part. Tomorrow, the mother was going to fight back. The next morning, Carter Sterling walked into the main boardroom of Sterling Industries for his quarterly review, feeling invincible. The city spread out below him, from the 80th floor vantage point, a kingdom at his feet. His board members, a collection of stony-faced, powerful men and women, were already assembled. His speech from the baby shower had worked its magic. The atmosphere was deferential, respectful. He was at the absolute zenith of his power. He was just launching into his opening remarks about market dominance when the boardroom doors opened. It wasn't his assistant. It was a stern-looking man in a cheap suit holding a thick manila envelope. "Carter Sterling," the man asked, his voice flat. Carter frowned, annoyed at the interruption. "Yes, what is it? I'm in a meeting." "You've been served," the man said, placing the envelope firmly on the polished mahogany table in front of Carter. A ripple of confusion went through the boardroom. Carter stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. He picked it up. His name was on the front, along with the seal of the New York County Supreme Court. With trembling fingers, he tore it open. The first page was a petition for dissolution of marriage. The petitioner, Isabella Rossi Sterling. The second was a motion for an emergency ex parte hearing to grant the petitioner sole legal and physical custody of the unborn child, John Carter Sterling, Jr. The third was a temporary restraining order, barring him from coming within 500 feet of Isabella. The blood drained from his face. He scanned the pages, his mind struggling to process the words. Emotional cruelty, coercion, psychological abuse. Attached as exhibits were transcripts of his conversations, his phone call with his mother, his speech at the baby shower, and the most damning of all, his sneering, vicious monologue from the night before, where he had called her a paid vessel and admitted to marrying her for her hips and clean genetic history. And then he saw the affidavit that started it all, a sworn statement from a sales clerk at Bond Point named Chloe, detailing his public declaration that his wife was just a surrogate. The room was silent. Every board member was staring at him. His empire, his image, his carefully constructed world was imploding in real time. "This is a mistake," he stammered, his voice hoarse. This is slander. It's blackmail." He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking with a rage so profound it made him dizzy. He dialed his lawyer. "Abernathy, get to the office now. My wife has lost her mind. She's filed for divorce. She's trying to take my son." Abernathy's voice on the other end was grim. "I'm already aware, Carter. I got a call from Alexandra Vance an hour ago. She's representing Isabella." The name hit Carter like a punch to the gut. Alexandra Vance. The lioness. He had heard the stories. He had never, not in a million years, imagined she would be coming for him. "You will crush her," Carter hissed into the phone, his voice a low growl. "You will use that contract to bury her. I own her. I own that child. It's all in the contract." There was a pause on the other end. "Carter," Abernathy said slowly, "the contract is the problem. Vance is arguing that your public and private statements, prove the contract was signed under duress and is evidence of a mindset that makes you an unfit parent. She claims you see your own child as a corporate asset. The surrogate comment. Carter. That was a fatal error. Carter hung up the phone, the world tilting on its axis. He looked up at his board. Their expressions had changed from confusion to cold, calculating appraisal. They weren't seeing a king anymore. They were seeing a liability, a scandal in the making. He stormed out of the boardroom, ignoring their stares. He raced to the elevator, violating the restraining order without a second thought. He had to see her. He had to fix this, to put her back in her place. When he burst into the penthouse, he was met with a sight that stopped him cold. Isabella was there, calmly directing two large men in security uniforms who were packing her belongings into boxes. She was no longer wearing the soft, elegant clothes he had bought for her. She was in jeans and a simple black t-shirt. She looked stronger, more solid. She looked like the woman he'd first met in that art gallery, but with a spine of steel he had never known she possessed. "What is the meaning of this?" he roared, his voice echoing in the half-empty room. "What have you done?" Isabella turned to face him, her expression calm and unreadable. "I'm leaving you, Carter." "You can't leave me," he shouted, taking a step towards her. One of the security guards immediately stepped between them. "I believe the court order says you can't come within 500 feet of my client, Mr. Sterling." The guard said, his voice polite but firm. Carter stared at the guard, then back at Isabella, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. "You think you can take my son? After everything I've given you, I will ruin you, Isabella. I will leave you with nothing. You will never see a penny, and you will never see that child. The contract is ironclad." Isabella finally spoke, her voice clear and without a tremor. "The contract is a confession, Carter. It's a confession of what you believe a wife and a mother are, and you were kind enough to confirm it over and over again, to a shop clerk, to your mother, to 200 of your closest friends, and to me." She took a step forward, stopping just beyond the guard's protective arm. "You told the world I was just a surrogate, a vessel you had acquired. You don't get to call yourself a father now that it's inconvenient. You don't get to claim a child you believe you purchased. My son is not an asset. He is a human being, and he deserves a mother, not a manager." For the first time in his life, Carter Sterling was speechless. He saw it all then, the months of her quiet compliance, the placid smiles, the way she had seemed to agree with everything. It hadn't been submission, it had been strategy. She had been playing him, using his own arrogance as a weapon. The woman he had dismissed as a simple, pretty object had outmaneuvered him at every turn. He had built an empire on the principle of absolute control. And in one swift, brilliant move, he had lost control of everything that mattered. His wife, his heir, his reputation, his legacy, it was all turning to ash in his hands. "You will regret this," he whispered, the threat sounding hollow even to his own ears. Isabella shook her head slowly. "No, Carter," she said, her hand resting on her belly. "For the first time in 2 years, I have nothing to regret." She turned her back on him, then a final, quiet dismissal, and went back to packing. Carter stood there for a long moment, a king dethroned in his own empty castle, listening to the sound of his world being sealed into cardboard boxes. 6 months later, the view from Isabella's window was not of Central Park, but of a quiet, tree-lined street in Brooklyn. Her apartment was modest by Sterling standards, but to her it was a palace. It was filled with light, the smell of oil paints and baby formula, and the sound that had become the center of her universe, the happy gurgling of her 2-month-old son, Leo. She had refused to name him Carter Jr. He was his own person, Leo Rossi. The divorce had been as brutal and swift as Alexandra Vance had predicted. The media had a field day with the story "Billionaire's Surrogate Shocker." The transcripts of Carter's own words were leaked. Alexandra had a knack for such things, and public opinion turned against him viciously. His board, fearing a catastrophic blow to the Sterling brand, had forced him into a quick and quiet settlement. The ironclad contract had been torn to shreds in court. The judge, a no-nonsense older woman, had been appalled by the evidence. She had called the agreement a form of modern-day indentured servitude, and had granted Isabella sole physical and legal custody of Leo. Carter had been given supervised visitation rights, twice a month, for 2 hours in the presence of a court-appointed monitor. He had come once. He had looked at the tiny, perfect baby in Isabella's arms with a strange, blank expression, as if he were looking at a flawed product he no longer wished to acquire. He hadn't touched him. He hadn't come back since. The $10 million trust from the contract was gone, voided along with the rest of it. Instead, the settlement had provided her with a comfortable but not extravagant lump sum and substantial child support. It was more money than she had ever dreamed of, but she lived simply. She had bought this apartment and set up an art studio in the spare bedroom. The rest was in a trust for Leo, a trust that he would control, not one that would control him. Isabella dipped her brush in a smear of cerulean blue, dabbing it onto the large canvas in front of her. It was a portrait, but not of a person. It was a portrait of a feeling, the chaotic, brilliant, overwhelming love she felt for her son. It was the best work she had ever done. Leo made a happy noise from his bassinet beside her easel. She put down her brush and scooped him up, his warm, solid weight, a constant, reassuring miracle in her arms. He smelled of milk and innocence. His eyes, big and brown like hers, blinked up at her. "Hello, my sweet boy," she whispered, kissing his soft cheek. "Did you have a good nap?" In this quiet, sunlit room, surrounded by her own art, holding her own child, Isabella finally understood what it meant to be rich. It wasn't about penthouses and private jets. It wasn't about bespoke suits or diamond cufflinks. It was this: the freedom to create, the right to love without condition, the fierce, unbreakable bond with the little boy who had saved her life as much as she had saved his. She had once been Isabella Rossi, the quiet art assistant. She had become Mrs. Carter Sterling, the woman in the gilded cage. Now she was just Isabella, a painter, a mother, free. And she wouldn't have traded it for all the empires in the world. Isabella's story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about wealth or status, but about the courage to fight for your own truth and protect the ones you love. She took on a titan of industry, armed with little more than his own words and a mother's fierce determination. And she won. Her victory wasn't just for herself, but for her son Leo, freeing him from a life as a legacy and allowing him to just be a child. It shows that no contract is ironclad against the power of the human spirit, and sometimes losing a life you thought you wanted is the only way to find the one you truly need. If this story of resilience and justice moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more real-life dramas that will leave you breathless. What did you think of Carter's fatal mistake? Let us know in the comments below.